The porcelain plate shattered against the kitchen wall with such force that shards embedded themselves into the pine boards. And Beatrice Ashford watched the destruction with trembling hands that reached immediately for the next dish in the cupboard. She had arrived in Dalhart, Texas, only 3 hours earlier on the afternoon stage, her entire life reduced to a single carpetbag, and a letter of employment that promised room, board, and $12 a month to cook and keep house for a rancher named Nathan Lowry. The letter had not mentioned that Nathan Lowry would be standing in the doorway when she arrived, his face carved from granite and his eyes holding all the warmth of a January norther, looking at her as though she were an unwelcome stray that had wandered onto his property. It had not mentioned that his first words to her would be a flat statement that his previous housekeeper had packed the kitchen exactly as his late wife had organized it, and that Beatrice should not disturb a single item. It certainly had not mentioned that when Beatrice had politely suggested that some of the dishes might benefit from rearrangement to make cooking more efficient, Nathan would inform her in a voice devoid of all inflection that his wife had been dead for 2 years, and if Beatrice could not respect the memory of a good woman, she could leave on tomorrow's stage. So Beatrice broke another plate, and then another, the sound of shattering china filling the kitchen like gunshots, each crash a declaration that she would not be dismissed, would not be made to feel small, would not spend another moment tiptoeing around the ghost of a woman she had never met. She had traveled 800 miles from St. Louis after her father's death left her without family or fortune, had endured the dust and heat and indignity of stagecoach travel, had walked into this ranch house with her head high despite knowing she was entirely alone in the world. She would not be cowed by a man too locked in grief to remember basic human courtesy. The sound of boots on the wooden floor made her pause with a soup tureen raised above her head. Nathan stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking most of the late afternoon light, his weathered face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. He was perhaps 30 years old, though the lines around his eyes suggested hard living, and his hands bore the calluses and scars of ranch work. For a long moment they stared at each other, Beatrice breathing hard, her dark hair escaping its pins, her green eyes blazing with defiance. "That tureen belonged to my grandmother," Nathan said quietly, Beatrice's arms lowered slowly. She set the tureen on the table with exaggerated care, then met his gaze steadily. "Then perhaps you should have mentioned that when you were busy informing me that I was an inadequate replacement for your wife." Something flickered in his expression, too quick to identify. "I never said that." "You did not need to." Beatrice gestured at the shattered remains of at least 24 dishes scattered across the kitchen floor. "Your entire manner said it quite clearly. I am not a fool, Mr. Lowry. I understand that I am here because you need someone to cook and clean, not because you desire company or conversation, but I will not be treated as though my very presence is an insult to the dead." Nathan removed his hat, running a hand through dark hair streaked with premature gray. "Mrs. Patterson, the woman who placed the advertisement for me, did not mention that the position might prove difficult." "Difficult I can manage," Beatrice said. "Impossible is another matter entirely. If you wish me to maintain your kitchen exactly as it was, to cook in a space organized by someone else, to live as a shadow in this house, then I will indeed take tomorrow's stage back to town. But if you can find it within yourself to allow that I might have some small authority in the space where I am expected to work, then I will stay. The choice is yours." She watched emotions play across his face, grief and anger and something that might have been shame. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "My wife Sarah died in childbirth. The baby, a girl, lived only 3 days. I have not moved anything in this house since the day we buried them because every change feels like erasing them from existence. But that is my burden, not yours, and I had no right to make you carry it. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and painful. Beatrice felt her anger drain away, replaced by a sorrow that ached in her chest. I lost my mother when I was 12, she said quietly. My father never recovered. He kept her room exactly as it was, would not allow me to touch a single possession. He died 6 months ago, and I think in many ways he had been dying since the day we lost her. Grief can consume us, Mr. Lowry, if we allow it. I learned that lesson well. Nathan looked at the broken dishes, then back at Beatrice. I suppose I deserve to have my china destroyed. I will replace what I broke, Beatrice said, though she had no idea how she would manage it on her salary. It was childish of me. It was honest of you. Nathan bent to pick up a large shard of plate, studying the painted blue pattern. Sarah ordered these from a catalog 3 years ago. She was so proud when they arrived. But they are just dishes, Miss Ashford. She would have been the first to say so. Mrs. Ashford, Beatrice corrected automatically, then wished she had not when she saw his expression shift. I am a widow. My husband died of pneumonia after only 8 months of marriage. That was 4 years ago. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared loss. Nathan set down the shard carefully. Then we are both trying to build new lives from the wreckage of old ones. It would seem so. I have 3 ranch hands who take their meals here, Nathan said, his tone becoming businesslike. Breakfast is at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at dusk. The hands sleep in the bunkhouse. Your room is at the back of the house, past the kitchen. I sleep upstairs. The well is behind the house. The smokehouse and root cellar are to the east. We run cattle and horses, about 500 head combined, across 10,000 acres. The nearest neighbor is 6 miles south. Beatrice nodded, committing the information to memory. What do you typically eat? Beef, beans, biscuits, coffee. Eggs when the chickens are laying. Potatoes from the cellar. Sarah used to make dried apple pie, but I have not had that in some time. I can make apple pie, Beatrice said. My mother taught me before she died. I am a competent cook, Mr. Lowry. I would not have accepted this position otherwise. I believe you. Nathan moved toward the door, then paused. I will help you clean this up. It is my fault as much as yours. They worked in silence as the sun sank lower, sweeping broken china into a crate, salvaging what could be saved. Beatrice found herself studying Nathan when she thought he was not looking, noting the care with which he handled even the smallest fragments, the way his shoulders seemed to carry a weight far heavier than any physical burden. He was not a cruel man, she decided, only a broken one. By the time the kitchen was clean and Beatrice had prepared a simple supper of fried salt pork, beans, and cornbread, the 3 ranch hands had arrived. They introduced themselves as Tom, a grizzled man of 50 with a limp from an old injury. Diego, perhaps 25 with quick hands and a ready smile. And James, who could not have been more than 19 and blushed scarlet when Beatrice greeted him. They ate with the focused intensity of men who worked hard for their living, and their compliments on the meal were sincere if brief. After the hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Beatrice washed dishes in water heated on the stove while Nathan sat at the kitchen table, ostensibly reviewing accounts, but mostly, she suspected, trying to determine what to make of his new housekeeper. When she finally hung the dish towel to dry and turned to bid him good night, she found him watching her with an expression she could not quite decipher. "Thank you for staying," he said. "I know I gave you every reason to leave." "I have nowhere else to go," Beatrice replied honestly. "But even if I did, I think I would have stayed. This ranch, this life, it seems like a place where a person might start over." Is that what you are looking for? A fresh start? Is that not what we all want? She met his eyes across the kitchen, the lamplight casting shadows across his face. A chance to be someone other than who grief has made us. Nathan stood, moving to the window to look out at the darkening land. I have been angry for so long that I have forgotten how to be anything else. Angry at God, at fate, at Sarah for leaving me, at myself for not being able to save her. The anger is easier than the sadness, so I hold on to it even though I know it is destroying me. Then perhaps it is time to let it go, Beatrice said softly. Not to forget, but to allow yourself to live again. He turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw a yearning so deep it took her breath away. I do not know if I remember how. Neither do I, Beatrice admitted, but perhaps we can learn together. The moment stretched between them, fragile and filled with possibility, until Nathan nodded slowly. Good night, Mrs. Ashford. Good night, Mr. Lowry. Beatrice lay awake in her small room for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her, thinking about broken dishes and broken hearts, and the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place. She had expected many things when she answered the advertisement, but she had not expected to find someone whose pain mirrored her own, someone who understood the particular loneliness of being left behind by the dead. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of shattered porcelain and careful hands piecing it back together. The days that followed established a rhythm. Beatrice rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, learning the preferences of the hands and adjusting her cooking accordingly. Tom favored extra bacon, Diego preferred his coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and young James would eat anything she put before him with an enthusiasm that made her smile. Nathan ate mechanically, as though food was merely fuel, but she noticed he always cleaned his plate and sometimes reached for seconds when she made something particularly well. The kitchen became hers in increments. She rearranged the cupboards to put the most used items within easy reach, scrubbed the stove until it gleamed, organized the pantry with military precision. Each change was a small act of claiming space, of asserting that she belonged here. Nathan said nothing about the alterations, though she sometimes caught him pausing in doorways, his expression distant, perhaps remembering how things used to be. 3 weeks after her arrival, Beatrice decided to make dried apple pie. She had found a crate of dried apples in the root cellar, along with preserved peaches and jars of wild plum jam, evidence of preparations made by a woman who had not lived to enjoy them. The discovery had saddened her, but she pushed the feeling aside and carried the apples to the kitchen, determined to create something good from the remnants of the past. She was rolling out pie crust when Nathan came in from the range, his clothes dusty and his face lined with fatigue. He stopped when he saw what she was making, his hand gripping the door frame. "Sarah's apples," he said. "Yes." Beatrice did not pause in her work. They should not go to waste. She clearly put effort into preserving them. She did. Nathan moved closer, watching as Beatrice laid the crust in the pie pan with practiced ease. She spent 3 days working on those, determined to have enough to last through winter. She was 6 months pregnant, and I kept telling her to rest, but she insisted. Said our daughter would need to learn the value of hard work and planning ahead. It was the first time he had spoken of his wife with anything other than pain in his voice. Beatrice heard affection there, and memory, and the beginning of acceptance. She sounds like she was a strong woman. She was, stubborn too. Once she set her mind to something, there was no dissuading her. Nathan pulled out a chair and sat, watching as Beatrice filled the crust with spiced apples. She would have liked you, I think. You have that same quality of not backing down. Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks. I am not sure that is a compliment. It is. His voice was quiet but certain. In this country, strength matters. Sarah understood that. She came from St. Louis too, city born and bred, but she adapted to ranch life as though she had been born to it. She could ride as well as any of the hands, shoot straight, help with calving when needed. She made this place a home. What was she like? Beatrice asked, surprising herself. Beyond the strength and stubbornness, Nathan was silent for a long moment, and she thought perhaps she had overstepped. But then he began to speak, his voice soft with remembrance. She laughed easily, found joy in small things. She loved wildflowers, would bring armfuls of them into the house in spring until every room smelled like the prairie. She sang while she worked, not particularly well, but with enthusiasm. She was kind to everyone, even those who did not deserve it, and she believed that tomorrow would always be better than today. That hope was a choice worth making. She sounds wonderful, Beatrice said honestly. I am sorry you lost her. So am I. Nathan watched as Beatrice crimped the edges of the pie crust. But I am beginning to realize that I have been lost as well, and that Sarah would not have wanted that. She would have expected me to keep living, to find happiness again. I have been failing her memory by refusing to do so. Beatrice slid the pie into the oven, then turned to face him. Grief has its own timeline, Mr. Lowry. No one can rush through it. Nathan, he said, I think after 3 weeks of you cooking my meals and organizing my household, you can call me Nathan. And I should call you Beatrice if that is acceptable. It is acceptable. She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous, though it is rather forward. This is Texas in 1883, Nathan said with the ghost of a smile. Formality seems excessive when we are living under the same roof, and you have seen me covered in mud from pulling cattle out of creek beds. A fair point. Beatrice found herself smiling back. Very well then, Nathan. Her name in his mouth sounded different than it had in anyone else's, shaped by his rough drawl into something almost musical. She busied herself with cleaning up, aware of his eyes on her, feeling a flutter of something in her chest that she had not experienced in years. She was 26 years old and had been certain that the capacity for such feelings had died with her husband, buried beneath layers of grief and resignation. The realization that it had not was both thrilling and terrifying. The pie emerged from the oven golden and perfect, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and apples. When she served it after supper, the ranch hands ate with reverent appreciation, but it was Nathan's reaction that mattered most to her. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and for a moment his face was unguarded, vulnerable with memory and present pleasure intertwined. Perfect, he said quietly. Just perfect. That night, after the dishes were done and the hands had retired, Nathan asked if Beatrice would sit with him on the porch. The May evening was mild, the sky vast and star-filled in a way that still took her breath away. They sat in chairs his wife had surely sat in, looking out over land his wife had surely loved, and Beatrice waited for the discomfort of being a replacement, an interloper. Instead, she felt only a strange sense of rightness, as though she had been traveling toward this moment without knowing it. Tell me about your husband, Nathan said. If you are willing. Beatrice considered the question, examining her feelings. She had not spoken of Charles in years, had locked those memories away as too painful to touch. But something about the darkness and Nathan's quiet presence made it feel safe to open that locked door, just a crack. His name was Charles Ashford. We married when I was 22, more from practicality than passion, I confess. My father was ill and struggling financially, and Charles was a clerk in his office who seemed kind and steady. I thought we would grow to love each other deeply, given time. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We did not get that time. He caught pneumonia that first winter, and he was gone within a week. I grieved him, but I think I grieved more for what might have been than for what was. Honesty, Nathan observed. Most people would romanticize a lost spouse. I have had 4 years to examine my feelings without romance clouding them, Beatrice said. Charles was a good man and I cared for him, but ours was not a great love story. It was an arrangement that might have become affection, given years to develop. His death was tragic, but it did not shatter me the way I imagined Sarah's death shattered you. It did shatter me, Nathan agreed. Sarah and I met when she came west to visit her aunt. I saw her at a church social and knew immediately that I wanted to marry her. She thought I was too forward, too rough around the edges. It took me 6 months to convince her to accept my proposal, and another 3 months before she agreed to marry me. But once we wed, we were happy. Truly happy in a way I had not known was possible. That kind of love is rare, Beatrice said softly. You were fortunate to have it, even briefly. I was. Nathan turned to look at her, his expression serious in the starlight. But I am beginning to understand that being fortunate once does not mean I can never be fortunate again. That might be the greatest gift you have given me, Beatrice. You have shown me that it is possible to move forward without abandoning the past. I have done nothing but cook your meals and rearrange your kitchen, Beatrice protested. You have done far more than that. Nathan's voice was low, intense. You have brought life back into this house. You hum while you work, leave windows open to air out rooms that have been closed too long, put wildflowers on the table just as Sarah used to do. You have reminded me that a home should be lived in, not preserved like a museum to the dead. And you have shown me that it is possible to acknowledge pain without drowning in it. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. I did not realize I was doing any of those things. That is what makes them powerful. You are not trying to fix me or change me. You are simply being yourself, and somehow that is enough to begin healing what I thought was permanently broken. They sat in silence after that, a comfortable quiet filled with cricket's song and the distant lowing of cattle. Beatrice felt something shift between them, a deepening of connection that went beyond employer and employee, beyond two lonely people sharing space. This was the beginning of something real, something that terrified her with its potential to hurt, but also called to the part of her that had been dormant for so long. The weeks turned into months, and spring gave way to the fierce heat of a Texas summer. Beatrice learned the rhythms of ranch life, the endless cycle of work that shaped each day. She watched Nathan with his cattle and horses, saw the gentleness with which he handled even the most fractious animals, the patience he showed to young James when teaching him to rope. The anger that had defined him when she first arrived gradually softened, though she knew it had not disappeared entirely. Grief like his did not simply vanish. It integrated, became part of the foundation rather than the entire structure. For her part, Beatrice found herself blooming in the Texas heat like the wildflowers that dotted the prairie. The work was hard and the isolation sometimes oppressive, but she had purpose here, had a place that was hers. She had not realized how adrift she had been in St. Louis, how the years after Charles's death had been merely existence rather than life. Here, every day brought new challenges and small triumphs. She learned to manage the temperamental stove, to make butter and cheese, to preserve vegetables from the garden she had coaxed to life behind the house. She learned to anticipate what the men needed before they asked, to read weather in the sky and trouble in the behavior of the animals. And she learned Nathan, the way she might learn a difficult piece of music or a complex recipe. She learned that he was quietest when most troubled, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged unexpectedly, that he was scrupulously fair with his workers and demanded as much of himself as he did of them. She learned that he still visited his wife's grave every Sunday, but that he no longer spent the entire day there lost in sorrow. She learned that he watched her when he thought she was not looking, his expression holding a mixture of wonder and wariness, as though he could not quite believe she was real. In late July, a traveling peddler arrived at the ranch, his wagon loaded with goods. Beatrice purchased fabric for new curtains and a set of sturdy dishes to replace those she had broken, counting out coins from her carefully hoarded wages. Nathan appeared while she was examining a bolt of blue calico, his hat in his hands. "Put that on my account," he told the peddler, gesturing at the dishes, "along with anything else Mrs. Ashford requires." "That is not necessary," Beatrice protested. "I broke those dishes. I should replace them." "I drove you to break them," Nathan countered. "It is only fair that I bear the cost." He paused, then added more quietly, "And I would like to buy you the fabric, a gift if you will allow it." "Why?" Beatrice asked, too surprised to be polite. "Because you have made my house a home again, and I want to show my appreciation." Nathan's ears reddened slightly. "And because the color would suit you." The peddler watched this exchange with undisguised interest, clearly recognizing courtship when he saw it. Beatrice felt her own face warm, but she nodded acceptance. "Thank you. That is very kind." That evening, she found a package on the kitchen table. Inside was not only the blue calico, but also a length of fine cream lace and a card that read simply, "You deserve beautiful things." Beatrice pressed the lace to her cheek, feeling something unfurl in her chest like flowers opening to the sun. The next Sunday, instead of visiting the cemetery alone, Nathan asked if Beatrice would accompany him. She agreed, her heart beating fast, understanding the significance of the invitation. They rode in the wagon, the morning air still holding a hint of coolness that would burn away by noon. The cemetery was a small plot on a rise overlooking the ranch, enclosed by a wrought iron fence that Nathan clearly maintained with care. Sarah's grave was marked by a white marble stone, her name and dates carved with precision. Next to it was a smaller stone for the baby, inscribed simply, "Beloved Daughter." Someone had planted roses that climbed the fence, blooming pink and fragrant in the summer heat. Beatrice hung back while Nathan approached the graves, not wanting to intrude on his private grief. But he turned and beckoned her forward, his expression open and without reservation. "Sarah," he said, speaking to the stone as though his wife could hear, "I want you to meet Beatrice Ashford. She came to work here in May, and she has become very important to me. I think you would like her. She is strong and stubborn and kind, just as you were. She makes apple pie from the apples you preserved, and the house smells like flowers again, and I find myself looking forward to each day instead of simply enduring it." Beatrice felt tears slip down her cheeks, moved beyond words by the simple intimacy of the moment. Nathan continued, his voice steady despite the emotion underlying it. "I will always love you, Sarah, always remember what we had. But I am ready to live again, to open my heart to the possibility of happiness. I hope, that is what you would want for me. I hope you can forgive me for moving forward." He placed his hand on the gravestone for a long moment, then turned to Beatrice. His face was wet with tears, but his expression was peaceful in a way she had never seen. "Thank you for coming with me. Thank you for bringing me," Beatrice whispered. "That was a gift, Nathan, to her and to me." "I needed to say it aloud," Nathan said. "Needed to give myself permission to feel what I have been feeling for you." "And what is that?" Beatrice asked, her heart in her throat. "Hope," Nathan said simply, "and the beginning of love." They stood together in the cemetery, the Texas sun beating down on them, and Beatrice understood that they were standing at a threshold. Everything could change from this moment, or they could step back, maintain the safe distance of employer and employee. But she had not traveled 800 miles and broken every dish in the kitchen and rebuilt her life from nothing to play it safe now. "I feel it too," she said. "The hope and the beginning. I am terrified of it, Nathan. Terrified of losing again, of building something only to have it torn away. But I am more terrified of living half a life, of letting fear make me small." Nathan reached for her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "Then we will be terrified together and brave together, and we will see where this path leads." The path led through the remainder of summer and into autumn, as their courtship unfolded with the careful deliberation of two people who had been burned and were determined not to rush into the flames again. Nathan brought her wildflowers from the prairie, and Beatrice made his favorite meals, and they talked for hours on the porch after supper, sharing histories and dreams and fears. They were chaperoned by the presence of the ranch hands and the propriety of separate sleeping quarters, but there was an intimacy in their conversations that went deeper than any physical touch. Diego noticed the change and winked at Beatrice when Nathan was not looking. Tom made gruff comments about how the boss seemed happier these days, then hastily changed the subject when Nathan glared at him. Young James blushed scarlet whenever he saw Nathan and Beatrice together, as though witnessing something private and sacred. In October, Nathan took Beatrice to Dalhart for the Harvest Festival, driving the wagon through the crisp autumn morning with her sitting beside him in a new dress she had sewn from the blue calico. The town was small but bustling, and Beatrice was introduced to neighbors she had not yet met, to the women who ran the general store and the hotel, to the minister who had buried Sarah and would later, she hoped, marry her to Nathan, Mrs. Patterson, the woman who had placed the employment advertisement, pulled Beatrice aside with a knowing smile. "I had hoped you two might suit," she confided. "Nathan has been alone too long, and you had that look about you of someone needing a purpose. I am glad it has worked out." "Did you plan this?" Beatrice asked, torn between amusement and indignation. "Plan is a strong word," Mrs. Patterson said airily. "Let us say I encouraged circumstances to align. Nathan is a good man and he deserves happiness, as do you, my dear." At the festival, Nathan won a shooting competition and presented Beatrice with the prize, a wool shawl in deep green. They danced to fiddle music in the town square, and Beatrice felt the eyes of the community on them, assessing and approving. She knew that in a place this small, their courtship was public property, subject to discussion and speculation. But she found she did not mind. There was something affirming about being seen, about having their connection acknowledged and welcomed. On the drive back to the ranch, as the sun set in spectacular shades of orange and gold, Nathan drew the wagon to a halt on a rise overlooking his land. He turned to Beatrice, his expression serious in the fading light. "I need to say something, and I need you to hear me truly," he began. "I loved Sarah with everything I had. Her death nearly destroyed me. For 2 years, I have been walking through my days like a ghost, unable to imagine a future that held anything but loneliness and duty. And then you arrived, this fierce woman who broke my dishes and refused to accept my anger, who brought life and light back into my home without apology or hesitation." He took her hands in his grip warm and strong. "I am falling in love with you, Beatrice. No, that is not quite right. I have fallen in love with you, completely and irrevocably. It is different from what I felt for Sarah, but no less real. You are not a replacement for her. You are yourself, wonderful and infuriating and exactly what I need, and I am hoping, praying that you might feel the same way." Beatrice could barely breathe past the emotion swelling in her chest. "I love you," she said, the words simple and true. I think I started falling the moment you helped me clean up those broken dishes, when I saw past your anger to the pain beneath. You are a good man, Nathan Lowry, better than you know. And yes, I am terrified because I know how quickly happiness can be stolen. But I would rather have one day of loving you than a lifetime of safety without you. Nathan kissed her then, the first time their lips had met, and Beatrice felt the world shift around her, realigning itself into a new configuration where this man, this moment, was the center of everything. His mouth was gentle against hers, reverent and asking permission even as he claimed it, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and hope she had been harboring for months. When they finally drew apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Beatrice. I know it is soon, perhaps too soon, but I am certain. I want you as my wife, my partner, the mother of my children if God wills it. I want to build a life with you, here on this land, and I want to start as soon as possible." "Yes," Beatrice said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." They were wed 3 weeks later in the small church in Dalhart, with half the county in attendance. Beatrice wore a dress of cream silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, with the lace Nathan had given her at the collar and cuffs. Nathan wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle on the arm of Tom, who had gruffly offered to stand in for her absent father. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the minister's words about love and commitment and building a life together resonating in the small space. When Nathan slipped the gold band on Beatrice's finger, she felt the weight of it like a promise, a vow that this time would be different. This time they would have the years denied to them before. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by every woman in the county. There was music and dancing and toasts, and Beatrice was embraced by people who had been strangers mere months ago, but who now welcomed her as one of their own. She saw Nathan laughing with the ranch hands, saw him accept congratulations with genuine pleasure, and marveled at the transformation in him from the grim man who had met her at the door in May. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Nathan swept Beatrice into his arms and carried her across the threshold of the house, both of them laughing at the tradition. He set her down gently in the front hall, then cupped her face in his hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lowry," he said softly. "Truly and completely home." "I have been home since I arrived," Beatrice replied. "I just did not know it yet." Their wedding night was a revelation of tenderness and passion, of two people who had thought themselves past the possibility of such intimacy finding in each other a perfect complement. Nathan was gentle and patient, mindful of her relative inexperience, and Beatrice gave herself to him without reservation, trusting him with her body as she had already trusted him with her heart. They loved each other through the night with an intensity born of grief transcended and hope embraced. And when morning came, they woke tangled together, complete in a way neither had been in years. The months that followed were a period of profound happiness. Beatrice settled into her role as Nathan's wife with ease, managing the household and supporting his work on the ranch. They developed the comfortable intimacy of a long-married couple, finishing each other's sentences and communicating with looks across a room. Nathan taught her to ride properly, and she taught him to enjoy food as more than mere fuel, preparing elaborate meals that made him groan with pleasure. They made love with enthusiastic frequency, in their bed and in other parts of the house when the ranch hands were safely away, delighting in each other's bodies with a passion that showed no signs of waning. In February, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with joy and terror in equal measure, memories of Sarah's fate looming large in her mind. When she told Nathan, she saw her own fear reflected in his eyes, along with something that might have been panic. "We will be careful," he said, his voice tight. "You will rest, do nothing strenuous. I will hire another woman to help with the housework." "Nathan, I am pregnant, not ill," Beatrice said gently. "Women have babies every day. Most of them survive just fine." "Most is not all." Nathan paced the kitchen, his agitation palpable. "Sarah was healthy and strong, and she died anyway. The baby died. I will not lose you the same way." Beatrice stood and caught his hands, forcing him to stop moving to look at her. "Listen to me. I am scared too. Of course I am scared. But I refuse to spend the next 7 months living in fear of what might happen. We will be sensible and careful, and we will trust that God has brought us this far for a reason. This baby is a gift, Nathan, a symbol of our love and our future. Please do not let Sarah's tragedy poison what should be a time of joy." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I love you so much," he whispered against her hair. "Too much. If something happened to you, I would not survive it." "Nothing is going to happen to me," Beatrice said with more confidence than she felt. "I am strong and stubborn, remember. It will take more than childbirth to defeat me." Despite her brave words, the pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her 4th month, leaving her weak and exhausted. Nathan hovered like an anxious bird, monitoring her every move, until she finally snapped at him to give her space to breathe. He hired Mrs. Patterson to help with the housework, despite Beatrice's protests that it was unnecessary, and forbade her from lifting anything heavy or riding horses, or doing any of 100 other things he deemed dangerous. "You are being ridiculous," Beatrice informed him in her 6th month when he tried to prevent her from walking to the garden. "Women work up until the day they deliver. I am not made of glass." "You are precious," Nathan countered, "and I am taking no chances." "You are driving me mad," Beatrice said, but she kissed him to soften the words. "I understand your fear, my love. I share it. But you cannot wrap me in cotton wool for the duration of this pregnancy. I need to move to work to feel useful. Trust me to know my limits." It was a delicate balance, managing Nathan's protectiveness while maintaining her own autonomy. But they negotiated it together, with compromise and communication, and occasional heated arguments that ended in passionate reconciliations. As Beatrice's belly swelled with their child, she saw Nathan begin to allow himself cautious hope, touching her stomach to feel the baby kick, talking to the child through her skin. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him after my father," Beatrice said one evening as they sat together in the parlor, her feet propped on Nathan's lap as he rubbed them. "Henry Arthur Lowry." "And if it is a girl?" Nathan asked. Beatrice hesitated, then said carefully, "What about Sarah?" "If you think it would honor her memory rather than cause you pain," Nathan's hand stilled on her feet. "You would do that. Name our daughter after my first wife. She was part of making you who you are," Beatrice said. "And who you are is the man I love." "I do not feel threatened by her memory, Nathan. I feel grateful that she loved you and shaped you and brought you to this place where we could find each other." "Sarah Hope Lowry," Nathan said softly. "Hope was Sarah's middle name. She would have liked that, I think. The idea of hope continuing through our daughter. Then that is what we shall call her, if God grants us a girl." The baby came in September, arriving 3 weeks early in a labor that lasted 14 hours. Nathan paced the house like a caged animal while Mrs. Patterson and the midwife attended Beatrice, forbidden from the birthing room by custom and his own terror of what he might witness. Beatrice labored with determination and focus, refusing to give in to panic even when the pain became overwhelming. She thought of Sarah, who had endured this same agony only to have it end in tragedy, and promised herself that she would survive for both of them, would live to raise this child and love this man and build the future Sarah had been denied. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty wail, the midwife announced, "A boy, Mrs. Lowry. A fine, healthy boy." Beatrice wept with relief and joy as they placed her son on her chest, this tiny, perfect creature with Nathan's dark hair and her own green eyes. He was beautiful and whole and alive, and she sent up a prayer of thanksgiving that they had both survived the ordeal. Nathan burst into the room moments later, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Beatrice, are you all right? Is the baby?" "Come meet your son," Beatrice said, her voice hoarse from hours of labor but suffused with happiness. "Henry Arthur Lowry, may I present your father?" Nathan approached the bed slowly as though in a dream. He looked down at his son with an expression of such wonder and love that Beatrice felt her heart might burst. When he gently took the baby in his arms, cradling the tiny body with infinite care, tears streamed down his face unchecked. "Hello, Henry," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise to love you and protect you for all of my days. You have made me the happiest man in Texas, son. You and your mama both." The first months of Henry's life were exhausting and joyful in equal measure. Beatrice navigated the challenges of new motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning through trial and error how to soothe her son's cries and decipher his needs. Nathan was a devoted father, walking the floor with Henry at night when the baby was fussy, changing nappies without complaint, staring at his son with an expression of perpetual amazement. "I never thought I would have this," he confessed to Beatrice one night as they lay in bed with Henry sleeping in a cradle nearby. "A wife I loved, a healthy child, a future that felt bright instead of bleak. You have given me everything, Beatrice, everything I thought I had lost forever." "We have given it to each other," Beatrice corrected. "You saved me as much as I saved you, Nathan. We are partners in this life we have built." As Henry grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Nathan expanded his herd and bought more land, investing the profits back into improving the property. He built a new barn and repaired the fences, hired additional hands to manage the increased workload. Beatrice tended her expanding garden and learned to preserve enough food to see them through the harsh Texas winters. The house that had been a mausoleum when she arrived became truly a home, filled with Henry's laughter and the sounds of a family living fully. In Henry's second year, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time the announcement brought joy unmixed with terror, both of them more confident in their ability to navigate the challenges ahead. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their daughter was born on a spring morning with flowers blooming outside the window, Beatrice delivered her with only 4 hours of labor. "Sarah Hope Lowry," Nathan said, holding his daughter with the same wonder he had shown with Henry. "Welcome to the world, little one. You are named for a woman who would have loved you very much, and you are loved by your parents beyond measure." Sarah was a contented baby, easier in temperament than her active brother had been. She had Nathan's smile and Beatrice's determination, and from her earliest days she seemed to observe the world around her with thoughtful intelligence. Henry was initially skeptical of his new sister, but quickly became her fierce protector, bringing her toys and patting her head with the gentle clumsiness of a toddler. The years unfolded in a pattern of work and celebration, challenges and triumphs. There were hard times, droughts that tested their resources and harsh winters that took a toll on the cattle. There were illnesses that frightened them, injuries that required care, the everyday struggles of ranch life. But there were far more moments of joy, milestones marked and traditions established, and love deepening with each passing season. When Henry was 6 and Sarah was 4, Beatrice gave birth to twin boys, a surprise that left Nathan stammering with shock when the midwife announced the second baby. They named them Thomas and James, after the ranch hands who had been with them since the beginning, and the two older men were absurdly proud of the honor. The house that had once held only grief now rang with children's voices, with laughter and arguments and the beautiful chaos of a large family. Beatrice sometimes paused in her work to marvel at how far she had come from the desperate widow who had arrived in Dalhart with nothing but a carpet bag and a letter of employment. She had built a life beyond her wildest imaginings, had found love and purpose, and a family that filled her heart to overflowing. Nathan, watching his wife wrangle their 4 children with patient affection, sometimes thought about the angry, broken man he had been before Beatrice shattered his dishes and his careful isolation. He had been so determined to preserve everything exactly as Sarah had left it, to freeze time at the moment of his greatest loss. Beatrice had forced him to understand that preservation was just another form of death, that honoring the past meant building a future worthy of those who had been lost. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Beatrice to the cemetery as he did every year on the anniversary of Sarah's death. The children remained at home with Mrs. Patterson, giving them this time alone to pay their respects. The roses on the fence were in full bloom, pink and fragrant in the summer heat. "Hello, Sarah," Nathan said, his hand resting on the gravestone. "I wanted to bring Beatrice and tell you about our life. We have 4 children now, 2 boys and 2 girls. Our daughter Sarah is named for you, and she has your kindness and your laugh. She would have loved you, I think, as I still do. But I want you to know that loving Beatrice does not diminish what we had. It exists alongside it, different but equally real. Thank you for loving me when you were here and for releasing me to love again. I carry you in my heart always." Beatrice placed flowers on both graves, the mother and child who had died so that she might live this life. "Thank you," she whispered, "for shaping him into the man I love, for making him understand the value of happiness so that he could recognize it when it came again. I promise to honor your memory by loving him well, by raising our children to know about you, by making sure you are never forgotten." They stood together in the sunshine, past and present woven together into something beautiful and whole. Then they returned to the ranch, to their children and their life, to the home they had built from broken pieces. Years later, when Nathan and Beatrice were gray and their children grown with families of their own, they would sit on the porch in the evening and remember. They would talk about that first day when Beatrice broke every dish in the kitchen, when her fury and his grief collided in a crash of porcelain. They would marvel at how something so destructive had been the catalyst for healing, how in breaking those dishes Beatrice had also broken through the walls Nathan had built around his heart. "You ever regret it?" Nathan would ask, his weathered hand holding hers with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. Answering that advertisement, coming to this wild place to work for a stranger. "Never," Beatrice would reply, her green eyes still bright despite the lines time had etched around them. "It was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I was insufferable when you arrived, especially because of that," Beatrice would say with a smile. "If you had been easy and charming, I would not have broken those dishes. And if I had not broken those dishes, you would not have seen me truly. The destruction was necessary, my love. It cleared away what was old and broken to make room for something new." They would sit in comfortable silence then, watching the sun set over the land they had worked together for decades, land that would pass to their children and grandchildren. The ranch had grown prosperous under their stewardship, but more than that, it had become a place of love and laughter, a home in the truest sense. Henry had taken over the day-to-day operations of the ranch years ago, proving himself a capable manager and a worthy successor to his father. Sarah had married a schoolteacher and opened a school in Dalhart, teaching the children of the county with the same patience and kindness her namesake had shown. The twins had gone into business together, buying additional land and expanding the family's holdings across the region. Nathan and Beatrice had grandchildren now, a boisterous crowd who visited often and filled the old house with noise and chaos that they pretended to complain about but secretly treasured. They had lived long enough to see their children happy and settled, to know that the legacy they left would be one of love and hard work and family. On a fall day in 1923, 40 years after they had wed, Nathan and Beatrice sat together on the porch as the first hints of winter touched the air. Nathan was 78, his body bent with arthritis but his mind sharp. Beatrice was 73, her hair white but her spirit undimmed. "You remember the apple pie?" Nathan asked suddenly. "The first one you made from Sarah's preserved apples." "I remember," Beatrice said. "You closed your eyes when you tasted it, and I thought perhaps I had made a mistake in using them." "It was perfect," Nathan said. "That was the moment I realized I was falling in love with you, not the first moment I noticed you, or the first moment I thought you were beautiful. The first moment I understood that you belonged here in this house in my life. You honored Sarah's memory while also making the space your own, and I knew then that you were extraordinary." "I was terrified I was overstepping," Beatrice confessed, "using her apples, changing her kitchen. But I also knew that I could not live as a ghost in someone else's life. I had to make the space mine, or I would never truly belong." "You belonged from the first moment," Nathan said. "I was just too broken to see it." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. They had had a good life, a full life, rich with love and purpose. They had known sorrow and loss, but they had also known joy beyond measure. They had built something that would endure beyond their own lives, a family and a legacy that would carry forward through generations. "I love you," Nathan said, as he had said thousands of times over their decades together. "Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Forever." "I love you too," Beatrice replied, her voice steady despite the tears that slipped down her weathered cheeks. "Thank you for letting me mend your broken heart. It has been the greatest privilege of my life." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of loss and built a love that had endured through all the challenges life had thrown at them. The dishes Beatrice had broken in fury and grief on that long-ago day were gone, replaced many times over through the years. But what had been mended that day, the broken pieces of Nathan's heart that Beatrice had carefully fitted back together, remained whole and strong, a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. As night fell over the Texas prairie, Nathan and Beatrice remained on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the evening chill, unwilling to leave each other's side even for the comfort of the house. They had learned long ago that time was precious and uncertain, that every moment together was a gift to be treasured. So they stayed, talking and remembering, laughing over old stories and marveling at how their lives had unfolded, until finally the cold drove them inside to the warmth of the home they had created together. They would have many more years together still, years of watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world, years of sitting on the porch and working in the garden and attending church on Sundays, years of simple, profound happiness that neither had believed possible when grief had defined their existence. But that evening, as they prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 4 decades, Nathan pulled Beatrice close and whispered against her hair, "You saved my life, you know. When you came here, I was already dead in all the ways that mattered. You brought me back to life." "We saved each other," Beatrice corrected, tilting her face up to kiss him. "I was just as lost as you were, Nathan, just as broken. We found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the pieces." "The broken dishes," Nathan said with a smile. "Best thing that ever happened to this house." "The broken dishes," Beatrice agreed, "and the mended hearts." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done for thousands of nights, secure in a love that had been tested by time and tragedy, and had emerged stronger for it. Outside, the Texas wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and growing things, of a land that had witnessed their love story and would remember it long after they were gone. The ranch would stand for generations, passing from their children to their children's children, a testament to what Nathan and Beatrice had built together. But more than the land or the cattle or the house, their true legacy was the love they had shared, a love born from brokenness, and mended with patience and care and unwavering commitment. And in the kitchen, the dishes Beatrice had purchased to replace the ones she broke would remain in service for decades more, used daily by the family that gathered around the table Nathan had built with his own hands. Every meal served, every cup of coffee poured, every pie baked in the old stove would be an echo of that first destructive act that had cleared the way for healing. Because sometimes, the story of love is not about perfect beginnings or flawless romance. Sometimes it is about broken people finding each other in the aftermath of loss, about the courage to destroy what no longer serves in order to build something new. Sometimes it is about a woman brave enough to shatter every dish in the kitchen, and a man brave enough to let her, to see past the destruction to the promise of renewal it represented. And sometimes, just sometimes, that is exactly the kind of love that endures, that transforms, that heals every broken thing and makes it whole again. Nathan Lowry and Beatrice Ashford had found that love in the wild west of Texas in 1883, in a ranch house haunted by grief and brought back to life by courage. They had built a marriage on the foundation of honesty and shared sorrow, had raised children and grandchildren who would carry forward the legacy of their devotion. They had loved each other through good times and bad, through drought and plenty, through sickness and health, exactly as they had vowed on their wedding day. And when Nathan died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Beatrice holding his hand and their children gathered around, his last words were of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes on Beatrice's face, "for breaking the dishes, for mending my heart, for giving me a life worth living." Beatrice outlived him by 3 years, remaining on the ranch she loved until her own peaceful death at 76. In those final years, she would often sit on the porch and talk to Nathan as though he were still beside her, telling him about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the changes to the ranch and the constancy of the land. And when her time came, she went willingly, eager to rejoin the man who had been her partner, her love, her home. They were buried side by side in the cemetery on the rise, their headstone reading simply, "Nathan and Beatrice Lowry, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents, together forever." Next to them, Sarah and the baby remained in their eternal rest, the 4 graves testament to a complex story of love and loss and redemption. And in the house Nathan had built, and Beatrice had transformed from a museum to the dead into a home for the living. new generations would gather around the table, eating from dishes that had replaced the dishes that had replaced the original broken ones. They would hear the story of how their great-grandmother had broken every dish in the kitchen on her first day, and how that act of destruction had been the beginning of the great love story that had given them all life. The story would be told and retold, embellished and refined, until it became legend in the family. But at its core, it would always remain true. A tale of two broken people who found each other in the Texas prairie, who had the courage to destroy what was holding them back and the patience to build something better in its place. A story of dishes shattered and hearts mended, of grief transcended and love embraced, of a legacy that would endure for as long as there were Lowrys to remember and honor where they came from. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift Nathan and Beatrice gave to each other and to the generations that followed. Not just the land or the ranch or the material wealth they accumulated, but the example of their love. The proof that it was possible to survive devastating loss and still find happiness again. That broken things could be mended, broken hearts could heal, and broken people could become whole when they found someone willing to do the patient, difficult work of piecing them back together. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving of weakness and quick to punish mistakes. But it was also a place where transformation was possible, where people could remake themselves far from the judgments and limitations of more settled society. Nathan and Beatrice had taken advantage of that possibility, had used the wildness and freedom of Texas to build a life that honored who they had been while embracing who they could become. Their love story was not a fairy tale, not a romance where everything was easy and obstacles melted away at the first declaration of affection. It was real and messy and complicated, full of moments of doubt and fear alongside the joy and passion. It was built on honest communication and mutual respect, on the willingness to be vulnerable with each other, and to do the hard work of understanding another person's pain. But it was also beautiful in its authenticity, in the way they chose each other every single day of their marriage. In the way Nathan learned to honor Sarah's memory while fully loving Beatrice. In the way Beatrice made space for Nathan's grief while refusing to be diminished by it. In the way they built a family and a home and a legacy together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of connection and commitment at a time. And it all started with broken dishes, and a woman brave enough to express her anger, and a man broken enough to see through that anger to the strength beneath. In the kitchen of a ranch house in Dalhart, Texas, on a May afternoon in 1883, Beatrice Ashford shattered porcelain and Nathan Lowry's carefully maintained defenses, and in doing so, set in motion a love story that would span decades and touch generations. That was the power of their story, the reason it endured and inspired. Because it proved that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that healing was possible even when it seemed impossible, that two people who had every reason to give up on happiness could find it together if they had the courage to try. Nathan and Beatrice Lowry had that courage. They reached for happiness with both hands despite their fear, despite their scars, despite every reason to protect their hearts and settle for mere survival. They loved boldly and lived fully, and in doing so, they created something that death could not destroy and time could not diminish. Their love story became part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of the Texas prairie, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. It became a touchstone for their descendants, a reminder that the Lowrys came from people who knew how to love deeply and build lasting things. It became a source of pride and inspiration, evidence that their family was founded on something more substantial than just land and cattle. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Nathan and Beatrice were together still, their love transcending even death. They were together as they had promised to be yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Forever. The dishes had been broken. The heart had been mended. And the love they found had proved strong enough to withstand everything the world could throw at it, enduring long past their mortal lives into a legacy that would never die as long as there were people who believed in the transformative power of love. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the broken dishes or the grief that had preceded the healing, but the love itself. The choice to open their hearts despite the risk. The courage to believe that happiness was possible again. The faith that together they could build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Nathan and Beatrice had made that choice, had shown that courage, had lived that faith. And in doing so, they had created a love story for the ages, one that began with destruction and ended with creation, that transformed brokenness into wholeness and grief into joy. Their story was complete, their ending perfect in its simplicity. They had lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. They had raised children who would honor their memory and continue their legacy. They had built a home that would shelter generations. They had loved each other with a devotion that never wavered. From the moment Nathan helped Beatrice clean up the broken dishes until the moment they were reunited in death. It was a good story. A true story. A love story that proved love was always worth the risk, always worth the effort, always worth believing in. And it all started with a woman brave enough to break every dish in the kitchen, and a cowboy broken enough to let her mend every piece of his shattered heart.